Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. Boris Diesenghausen is with you. August 1st, here are the main news stories at this moment. Another senseless, absolutely militarily pointless terrorist shelling of Ukraine. Today, Russia launched 35 missiles and nearly 200 drones at us. So, out of those 35 missiles, 27 were ballistic. The main strike targeted Kyiv. This was exactly one of those cases when you simply don't have time to reach a shelter, and it's not safe either. That is, running across open spaces when ballistic missiles are hitting is extremely dangerous. If a ballistic strike catches you indoors somewhere, it's better to stay there. Today at 1:28 a.m., the air raid siren went off here in Kyiv, and by 1:30 the first ballistic missiles were already flying, followed by zircons. People who were running to shelter across open ground were caught by another ballistic strike and unfortunately were killed. Therefore, if ballistic missiles are already striking, it's better to stay somewhere indoors. Today I saw footage from the place where people died. There in the courtyard, the cars, the walls, the entrance doors are literally riddled with tiny holes from shrapnel. And each of these fragments brings death, especially if you are out in the open. And under no circumstances should you go outside or start filming. Well, unfortunately, there were casualties. The bastards once again showed today that they are bastards. They launched everything they had loaded and stationed in the Kursk and Bryansk regions. I just wish that at the very least these two regions would just fall into hell already. During the night shelling, the territory of Kyiv Medspetstrans was hit twice. That is, as a result of this strike, 5 ambulances were destroyed. And today, a repeated strike was carried out against our rescuers. A police officer who was saving people was killed. The guy was 22 years old. This absolutely vile tactic of theirs, when they strike once, wait for the rescue services to arrive and start saving people, and then hit the same place a second time to kill the rescuers, to kill the medics. They launched 4 Zircon missiles, 27 Iskander or S-400 ballistic missiles, 2 K-31 missiles, and 2 K-59 missiles. The total cost of this night strike, taking into account the munitions, fuel, and launch preparations, is about $120 million. In other words, Russia spent $120 million last night. Once again, instead of saving children in Russia, Putin is killing in Ukraine. He's just a completely deranged maniac. Just imagine, right now in Russia, thousands of parents are scraping together and giving away their last savings to save their children, selling their apartments, taking out loans, just to pay for the necessary surgeries for children who need them. And meanwhile, this underground psychopath burns through a budget in one night that could pay for thousands of such surgeries. I went again to the website that raises money in Russia for surgeries for Russian children. It's called Rusfond. And there they are collecting donations. Here is an operation for 8-year-old Matvey for reconstruction, a reconstructive surgery for 6-month-old Varya. So if you take the cost of just this one night of shelling, and this wasn't even the largest attack, there was an even more powerful one recently. So if you take the cost of this shelling, it could have paid for 4,000 complex surgeries for Russian children. Can you imagine that? Instead, there are destroyed homes, people killed and wounded, including injured children. 9 people killed in Kyiv, more than 30 wounded. My condolences to those who lost loved ones today, and I wish a speedy recovery to those who were injured. Just imagine for a second, any normal person, like you for example, every day has a choice. Here, to save 4,000 children with necessary surgeries, or here, to simply launch missiles at Ukraine at night and kill 9 people and wound 35. Here, 4,000 children's lives are saved, and there it's just about killing Ukrainians. And every day he chooses to kill Ukrainians. It's absolutely obvious that a normal person would choose to save, not to kill. Russians should have raised the alarm back when, in his first year in power, Putin was grinning and talking about the Kursk submarine, saying, "It sank." It was already clear then that he was just a maniac. By the way, Putin didn't even interrupt his vacation in Sochi back then, while Russian sailors were breathing their last oxygen, suffocating in agony, dying. They could have been saved, by the way, but he was off somewhere riding a jet ski in Sochi. It is a fact that most people today, there is this incredibly strange and unsettling feeling hanging in the air, primarily because the vast majority of Russians actually seem quite happy to have such a ruler leading them, even though he is such a completely vile, cruel, and dangerous maniac. So it turns out that the majority of Russians are an aggressive biomass. I'm saying the majority, not everyone. There are those who truly sympathize with and help Ukraine. There are those who are fighting for Ukraine, including the RDK and the Legion. But there are also garlic and vodka-infused protozoa who constantly want to repeat something, who stick pieces of pipe onto their rusty wrecks, write "to Washington" on them, drive around somewhere and yell, bellowing, wanting to trample the neighbor's flower bed with their filthy bast shoes because they don't want others to live well. No, what they want is for you not to live well. So what should we do about them? It seems to me that the only way to rid the world of this threat, of this blight, is to achieve the fragmentation of the Russian Federation, just as happened with the USSR once. The breakup of Russia into small entities, which individually would no longer pose such a threat to their neighbors or even beyond their neighbors. In Putin's country, there are still schools with outdoor toilets. Can you imagine kids have to go outside to the toilet in minus 20 degrees while he spends billions on the war every day? In Russia, I looked at the statistics. About 1.5 million Russians live in officially recognized hazardous apartment buildings. These are official figures. 1.5 million. Actually, the real number is, of course, much higher. These are the very slums, by the way, from which Putin has been promising to rescue Russians for 15 years now. But the paradox is that in these hazardous homes, where the ceiling is about to collapse on the residents, you will definitely find portraits of Putin on the wall. Definitely. In fact, the more rundown the place is, the more likely you are to find a portrait of Putin there. Can scientists somehow solve this mystery? What are your thoughts? Why does this happen? By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel as well. It's important. We are fighting against Putin's propaganda. Together, we'll be much more effective at it. So make sure to subscribe. Don't put it off. You can do it right now. So I'm looking at the news today. In Tyumen, people are lining up for drinking water because the tap water smells like feces. In a city of nearly 1 million people, water is being distributed at several locations. Tyumen residents, by the way, are posting videos where people literally rush to the trucks bringing water, running with canisters and containers to make sure they get enough water. Just think about it. Tyumen is the center of Russia's main oil and gas region. Water comes out of the tap, smelling like sewage, because for years no one prepared for the floods. Why bother? There was no money for it, and the riverbeds weren't cleared. And Russians are rushing to the water trucks like in the movie Mad Max. I don't know if you've seen it, but you'll understand me. Remember when they released the water from the cliff and everyone rushed below in rags, grabbing mugs, plates, any kind of container just to get enough water? But spending hundreds of millions overnight on a strike against Ukraine, that's no problem at all. And no one says a word. What I'm getting at is that this is how they'll always behave. They will keep waging war unless they're stopped. The Soviet Union was always at war, and now the Russian Federation is constantly attacking everyone. An aggressive animal farm with imperial ambitions. Meanwhile, Ukraine continues to systematically and cold-bloodedly, at least as much as possible under these circumstances, methodically burn down the Russian Federation's economy. Today, as a result of an attack by Ukrainian drones, one of Ufa's 3 oil refineries was destroyed. Bashneft, Ufa Neftekim. So let me read you the version from the local head, Radi Kabirov. He's quite the inventor. He always has some kind of explanation. One time he said foxes took matches and set the grass on fire. Another time it was some lens refracting sunlight. But this time, look, here's the official version. They repelled yet another drone attack on Ufa. Because of the falling debris, smoke appeared in the industrial zone. All the emergency services are on site. We're handling everything. Everything's great. These smokes, these bangs. But why is it, for example, in Ukraine? Have you ever wondered why in Ukraine, if there's an explosion, they call it an explosion, like explosions in Kyiv? No one calls them bangs. People would look at you like you're an idiot. Those are explosions. Everywhere people say explosion, fire, because this is war, it's frightening, and there's no need to be afraid of calling an explosion scary, because explosions kill people, just like today in Kyiv. So why call it a bang and smoke? Let's take a look at this smoke, the bang from the debris there, and so on. Let's take a look. This is what that smoke looks like. I don't know. If you call an explosion a bang, does it stop being an explosion? Or how were authors supposed to write about it before? Tell me, uncle, was it not for nothing that Moscow, shrouded in smoke, was given to the French? Here's another point. When they talk about Ukraine on Russian TV, they say explosions. But when it's about Russia, they call them bangs. So you see, the experiments on the minds of the deep people continue? Well, let's continue. Today, drones visited many locations. Let's continue with occupied Crimea. By the way, I noticed, maybe it's just me, I don't know, but the head of the occupation authorities in Crimea, Aksionov, seems to have disappeared somewhere. There's information that he'll be removed soon, closer to the elections, and all the failures in Crimea will be pinned on him, so that treacherous scumbag has gone into hiding. Anyway, today in Crimea there was a strike on the base of unmanned seaboats. This is in the village of Chernomorskoye, western Crimea. There, the Russians stored, serviced, and prepared their unmanned seaboats for reconnaissance, security, and various other operations in the Black Sea. Plus, today the Sewage railway bridge was taken out. This is in the Chonhar area, and also the railway bridge near Vladislavivka. This is also an important hub in eastern Crimea, which connects Kerch, Feodosia, Jankoy, and so on. In general, Crimea continues to be cut off. By the way, there has also been significantly less news coming out of occupied Crimea. They gave instructions simply not to report any news from there. You know, Putin has always reacted this way. When the Kursk submarine sank, pretend that nothing is happening. Just keep riding the jet ski. Maybe it will just go away on its own? It's exactly the same with Crimea. There are extremely serious problems. We pretend that everything is fine there, and then the bridge gets blown up. Well, that's just how it happened. Whoever managed to escape, managed to escape. Another important piece of news. Today, Rosatom announced the sinking in the Black Sea of the container ship Yanin, which belonged to Rosatom's subsidiary Fesco. This container ship was under sanctions. The strike was carried out by naval drones and the vessel sank. Why is this not just a strike on a container ship, but a powerful blow to Russian maritime logistics? Since the end of 2023, the transport company Fesco has been managed by the state corporation Rosatom. Formally, Rosatom is not just the nuclear industry, it is also a major state logistics operator. So Fesco is one of the largest Russian container carriers. It services dozens of international and domestic sea routes. Fesco ships transport both import and export cargo. And now, after this container ship has sunk, I think companies will be looking for other operators, non-Russian ones at the very least, if they don't want their containers to end up at the bottom of the sea. So this is a powerful blow to all Russian maritime logistics as a whole. And I also think this is a kind of peculiar greeting to that old bastard Patrushev, who heads the maritime board in Russia, which was created especially for him. Well, Ukraine is performing an incredible feat, and in every episode we have an important fundraiser for the Ukrainian Defense Forces. Today we are continuing to raise funds for a pickup truck for the soldiers of the tank battalion of the 31st Separate Mechanized Brigade. They are in urgent need of transportation right now. Unfortunately, the previous one was lost, but we have just a little bit left to go. I think today we will close this fundraiser. Let's come together, and I think we can make it happen today. The soldiers have recorded a video message for you. Please take a look.
Бажаю здоров'я. Ми бійці відділення Церберу з 31-ї МБР разом з Борисом Тізенхаузеном та 24-м каналом відкрили збір на автомобіль, який допоможе в виконанні наших бойових задач. Долучайтесь, разом ми сила. Слава Україні! Героям слава!
Let's help our warriors. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. There are mono, private, and PayPal options for those who want to help from abroad. And there is always a QR code for those watching me on other channels. Your donation directly saves the lives of our defenders. And in every episode, I thank you separately for helping Ukraine and supporting our warriors. Thank you so much. Russian companies have started looking for specialists in military and mobilization records management. Russians stubbornly refuse to see what is coming. Well, I mean the Russians who don't want to die for Putin. And for some reason, I believe there are quite a few of them. In the past week alone, almost 1,500 such job openings have appeared on Headhunter, while in the entire year of 2021 there were fewer than 150. That is, the number of specialists who are registered for military service and specialize in mobilization has increased many times over. They're searching, and why do you think they're looking for them? So, Russians, do you still not believe that there will be a mobilization? Let's just add 2 and 2 together. So Putin needs to capture Donbass, and maybe not just Donbass. In the 5th year, he still hasn't done it, and judging by everything, he won't be able to do it with the resources he currently has. How can he turn the tide of events? There are two options. Strike Ukraine with a weapon of mass destruction, like a nuclear weapon, but then he's finished. That is, he won't solve the problem of taking Donbas, he'll simply be finished. Putin will be finished. Or he could send at least another 500,000 Russians to war, try to open a new front, and still attempt to capture Donbas. Which option will Putin choose? It's amazing that Russians still don't fully believe this. They live in a country where you can end up in prison for several years just for a post or a like. And who will stop Putin? Who will stop him if tomorrow he says, well, I've decided yes. Just like he said, I've made the decision that you all must go and die. Go ahead. Who will stop him? The question of how effective this measure would be is a separate topic. The fact that the Russian economy would instantly collapse is also a separate story. But all of this still requires money. And where will they get it, you might ask? Well, here are two pieces of news for you right away. The first piece of news, Sberbank has announced that banks do not have the money to finance Putin's budget deficit. That's it. Sber said, no, there is no money, but hang in there. In other words, Russian banks do not have free ruble liquidity to buy federal loan bonds, which the Ministry of Finance uses to cover the budget deficit. But in the regions, rumors have started spreading about the forced conversion of Russians' deposits into military bonds. In other words, officials in Russian regions are afraid of a financial special operation, as they are already calling it, within which part of Russians' deposits could be forcibly converted into military bonds. Several sources close to the governments of various subjects of the Russian Federation have told the publication Verstka about this. Just a year ago, Deputy Chairman of the Central Bank, Alexei Zabotkin, said that a ban on withdrawing deposits in Russia was simply impossible. And let me quote, because this is important. This would have devastating consequences for the financial system and the economy. And doesn't the war have devastating consequences for the financial system and the economy? And yet nothing. Putin continues to wage war. Listen, maybe when just a couple of days ago Putin was hissing from the podium at the deputies saying, you need to be bolder, bolder, maybe that's exactly the kind of decisions he had in mind. Freezing deposits, banning withdrawals, a new wave of mobilization. What else could he have meant then? I think that's exactly what he meant. But here I would like to draw attention to a very important point. The more the Botox jellyfish jerks on its strings, the more radical the decisions it makes, the more painful the consequences of those decisions are for the Russian Federation itself. Putin is now absolutely incapable of calculating the consequences of his decisions, and he has already set in motion a scenario that will destroy both himself and the Russian Federation. And you know what's interesting? Even in the Russian Federation, the question of when he will finally die is not in doubt for anyone. But who is this question being asked about? Well, friends, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, subscribe to this channel, don't forget. And let's help our fighters from the 31st Separate Mechanized Brigade. Our help is needed by them right now. The link to donate is in the description of this video. Have a peaceful day, everyone, and glory to Ukraine.